I'm going to be pitting my Bambu Lab X1C against the Qidi Plus 4 in a head-to-head battle to see which printer comes out on top. But before I can do that, you guys are telling me that you think the quality of my X1C prints should be much better. So in this video, we're going to see if we can find out what exactly is the cause of that problem and fix it before we move on to that battle. So stick around. I think the micro LiDAR, or more correctly known as the dual red laser scanning, is one of the best features of the X1C printer. If we're printing the same materials over and over again, it's not actually that useful, but if we're constantly changing, it is a huge time saver. But the convenience of it might be coming at the cost of quality. So to test this theory, I've created this print, which contains the nowhere stair with the fail rail scaled to 75%, a benchy, and a Bambu calibration cube as well. I'm printing with a 0.4 millimeter E3D high flow nozzle, 0.16 layer height, 3 walls, 15% infill, and I will be using Arachne rather than Classic, and we will do all 3 parts at the same time, which does help with cooling, but it also tends to produce a little bit lower quality results in this way, especially when one of the 3 parts finishes for some reason. If you'd like to try this nowhere stair with fail rail yourself, there will be a link below as well. It was originally designed to be a build plate adhesion test first, but with the fail rail, it has become a true torture test. I will be using the Bambu Super Tack for these tests as well. It has excellent adhesion and a very fine texture on the surface, which does not seem to have any negative impacts on the scanning, at least not that I've noticed. And I will be printing with purple Bambu Lab Matte PLA. I think we should start by printing with the stock filament settings in the slicer. Who knows, maybe they'll actually be pretty good. These 3 tests have finished, so let's move on to the first calibration method and my personal favorite, the automatic flow calibration using micro LiDAR. It initially slows down the print, but it saves my time in having to do anything myself. So we're sending the same print, but with the box checked, and let's have a look at what it's doing. It will lay down a pattern, and I believe that it does both a PA test and a flow test at the same time. The PA test is the same as linear advance, and it's also the same as what Bambu is calling flow dynamics. So we have several lines that are laid down, and those are scanned, and then we should see that the final extrusion just before the print begins has the adjustments to the PA and to the flow. And in this case, it isn't actually looking quite right. To be honest, I never really watched this part of the print. I've always just trusted that it's working the way it's supposed to, and it does not look that good to me, but we'll have to see how the print turns out. For the next test, I want to run a calibration sequence through the slicer. So we have flow or volume of material being calibrated, and we have the PA test again as well. But these are being done through the slicer in a semi-automatic way. I've only used this method once, and that was when I was switching to the 0.2 millimeter nozzle. For the PA test or flow dynamics, we have a 0.018, which does seem a little bit low, but maybe it's possible. And then for the flow rate test, we have a 0.946. Again, seems a little bit low to me. So let's run the semi-automated calibration torture test and see how it turns out. The automatic calibration through the slicer has just finished. Let's take these over and compare them. I'm starting to get a little bit worried that we're running out of options here. We only have one more left. I'm going to pop these off and mark them. We'll take a quick look and see if there's any differences here. And then we're going to have to move on to the last and hopefully the most successful option, but I'm not sure. I have one more test that I want to do, and that is the manual calibration, but we have some preliminary results here, and they are unexpected results. At least I didn't expect them. So the stock settings and the automatic calibration through the slicer produced almost identical results. Not just on the calibration block, but across the board. On the benchies as well. The seams They're not exceptional results, but they're not bad results either. And on the nowhere stair and fail rail as well. And you can see here almost identical results. There's some little depressions when it transitioned up for each step there. But that is not the case when it was calibrating during the print or at the beginning of the print using that automatic calibration method. And I did not do anything differently than what I usually do. You can see the seams look terrible. For the benchy, calibration cube, and for the fail rail and nowhere stair, you can't really tell because I've hidden the seams. But the other two produced pretty poor results on the seams, especially slightly worse results on the rest of the print. But it's really that seam that is most critical here, and it looks horrific. So that is completely unexpected because I've been doing that at the beginning of every single print, thinking that I'm probably getting the best results by doing that, but that may not have been the case. And if you look at the calibration menu, you'll see that there is about a 10% jitter. I don't exactly know what jitter means, but I don't think it's a good thing. I want about 0% jitter. So now I think we're going to have to move on to manual calibration to get the absolute best results. I've never done this method before for the X1C, but there is a complete manual calibration feature in Bambu Studio. So let's give that one a go. I have Bambu Studio open. I'm over at the calibration tab, and we're going to do flow dynamics first, manual calibration. And we are going to calibrate on the super tack. So we have a choice of pattern or line. Let's try line first. We've got the right one selected. Go ahead and calibrate. So it does look pretty accurate to 0.018, but I think we're going to run the other one just in case. I kind of like that test because we have several layers here. Some of them were at pretty high speeds actually. From this test, I think actually we should be in around the 0.015 or 0.01 range rather than 0.018. And that could make a bit of a difference. So it looks like we have between 0 and 5 for the rough flow calibration. I also did the fine flow calibration and I ended up with a 0.983 for flow and a 0.013 for pressure advance. I applied those and let's run that last test. Before we get to the results, a quick update for the channel. We did not quite reach the 100,000 subscriber goal by 2025, but we made it 96% of the way there, and I think that's still pretty good. So this channel is going to keep going, and that is all thanks to your support and the support of my patrons as well. So thank you very much. I want to make this channel into one of the most reliable sources for 3D printing information, and to do that, we're going to be starting to buy more products. We're going to be doing even more testing and dissecting each product even more to see what's going on under the hood so we know what we're getting. I'm also going to be testing products as long as possible to make sure that there are no failures over a longer period. I also finally have an award video coming up, and it has taken me a lot longer to get the custom parts designed and printed than I was thinking, but we're nearly there. And I'm also working on some high-end gaming products, and we'll be showing them off in some upcoming videos also, so keep an eye out for those as well. I ended up using the high temperature build plate. It's a little bit darker. I thought maybe that would have a positive impact on it, and I did the full automatic calibration. And if we look closely here, we can see that that final extrusion line does not look particularly consistent, and unfortunately the results really aren't that good. I also tested with classic extrusion turned on, and Arachne is no longer active, and the results were not as good on this version either. So there were a couple other little variations I decided to try just to see whether there'd be any improvement, and unfortunately there was not. Out of all the tests that we did, I actually think the calibration cubes did a great job of showing the good and the bad of each one. So let's take a look at those. For the stock, it looks like the flow rate is pretty good. You can see from the top, it's all filled in nicely, and the flow dynamics or pressure advance looks good. The seam is barely visible on this one. I do have some pretty harsh lighting from up above, so you're going to see some defects that you wouldn't see typically if you have softer lighting. For fully automatic, flow rate is close but not quite on, and that seam, terrible. So flow dynamics or pressure advanced settings are incorrect, and overall it just does not look quite as good. The auto through the slicer, the seam is definitely better, but you can see the flow rate isn't quite right either, so that's not perfect. For manual, the flow rate looks really good, and the seam is barely visible, so pretty good. This is classic rather than Arachne, but it is the manual settings. Flow rate still good, of course, and the seam is right here, again barely visible. And the fully automatic on the high temperature plate, the seam again is not great. It's definitely better than the other one, and the flow rate is a little bit under on this one. So what is the final verdict? Well, if you are using Bambu filament, you may as well just use the stock settings. That's what seems to work the best. Yes, you can do a manual calibration, and you might be able to improve the settings a little bit more as well, but it doesn't seem like it's making that much of a difference. If you use the automatic, full automatic calibration like I've done here, you get inconsistent results. They're not always predictable. Sometimes it might work out well, other times maybe not so much, and that's probably what you guys have been pointing out in my videos. Now I will mention as well, I use very harsh lighting. You can see there from the ceiling, I've had to actually conceal some of it, and that does tend to show some of the defects a little bit better, so I thought that was probably contributing. Now, if you have the magic recipe to get this working properly every single time, please let us all know in the comments down below and share your knowledge. And now I'm going to have to figure out a way to build multiple tiny dollhouses so I have a place for all these staircases to go. And now it's time for the final verdict. Can you guess how I tried to print this? This is 100% solid print, so it is a pretty difficult print if your settings aren't quite right. I used the stock settings. So unfortunately, for this particular filament, it did not work perfectly for me. And it's going to be really, really tough without perfect calibration to get this to work out. There is nowhere for the extra to go. So normally it would go into the infilled area, and in this case, it has to go out or up, or both. This is an example of a perfectly calibrated or very close to perfectly calibrated print. This is again 100% solid. This is a different filament, and it was actually done on my GD Plus 4. The other one was done on the Bambu X1C. But you can see here, look at the top, it looks really good. And I'll bring this over and show you how it fits, because this is critical inside here. The seam isn't maybe perfect, but I'm not too worried about it since this is a 100% functional part. I'm not really too worried about how it looks. It just has to fit, and this surface has to be very smooth as well. We were able to achieve both of those things, so it is possible, but it has to be manually calibrated. If you want something like this, manual calibration is the only way to achieve these results. This is how it came off of the printer. It hasn't been adjusted at all. You can see the inside there, no sanding, nothing. And this is a hub, and it fits on very snugly with a little bit of persuasion, but it will go onto this 7/8 shaft or 22.2 something millimeter shaft. And if you want to know exactly what this is for and see it in operation, make sure you subscribe, because it's going to be the next video or maybe the video after if I can get this all finished up. In the end, if you want the most accurate print that also look good too, not much can beat the good old manual calibration method. When I was digging into this a bit, I also found out that the A1 series printers, including the Mini, use a different technology to compensate for nozzle pressure. So those printers are a completely different animal. I don't own one, but if you do, let us know what you think about the fully automatic and active calibration method used on those printers. I'll continue to work on some very fine adjustments so that we have the absolute best possible head-to-head battle for both printers, so look out for that video. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. Take care, and we will see you on the next one. If you're still here and watching this very slow scrolling list of my patrons, you might want to check out another video that I made down there. Or maybe hit that subscribe button up at the top. We'll catch you on the next one.